Hello and welcome to another session of The Game Mechanics. Today we're going to talk about puzzles and their integration into a story-centric game. Could not be more excited for our guest today, Elan Lee, who I've had the privilege of knowing, for 25 plus years, many years. And while puzzle design is only a small part of the kind of creative process that Elan has become a master of, it is a place where I look at some of the most amazing puzzles that I've been part of, and they always have Elan at the center of them. So super excited to have him come here and talk about that with us.
Thanks. That's nice of you to say. Yeah. I cannot believe how long we've known each other, by the way. That is, you were just because I know you won't go into the background. You were my first boss at Microsoft, literally right out of college. First job out of college. I get thrown into a random room with you. My official title was program manager. And I remember you, after working with me for like a month, you said, "You're a terrible program manager, but I think you're a pretty good designer. So we're going to switch titles and see how that goes for a while." And that is how I got started in game design.
Do I say I'm sorry now, or does that come later?
I don't wait. It could have gone a lot of ways. I'm secretly, or maybe not so secretly, happy with this particular path. So thank you.
Well, you've excelled. I mean, after all, built one of the most amazing game companies to hit tabletop games in a generation with Exploding Kittens and all the incredible games you've built after that. So I think I was right in this case.
Fair enough. Yeah.
So you and I worked a lot on ARGs, alternate reality games, which are giant storytelling experiences, different from kind of an RPG, but only in a sense, because we always viewed our ARGs like it was a giant RPG, like it was a tabletop RPG where we were the game masters and we were playing with millions of people simultaneously. Structurally a little different, but puzzles played a very important role in ARGs, as they do in computer RPGs. Maybe you could spend a minute on your thoughts on how puzzles work in story games and kind of what's the role of them in a story game.
Yeah, I'm not going to have a perfect answer for this, but it's certainly something I think about all the time. And maybe it's very telling that I don't have a perfect answer after like decades of thought applied to it. Puzzles are a way to reward your players for being themselves, for being as good as they are at being themselves. And I remember a phrase that we used to throw around a lot is like, how do we use puzzles to make players feel like extraordinary versions of themselves? And that's always been somewhere held in my heart, because I've watched a lot of people get it wrong. I've watched a lot of designers put puzzles out there where they think like, it's me against you. I'm going to design a puzzle that's so cool and so intricate and so elaborate and so smart because I'm so smart that you're never, ever, ever going to solve it. Because if you do solve it, then I haven't done my job right. And I hate that. I hate that. It, like, for me, when I watch players play my games and I watch them solve a puzzle, even a particularly hard puzzle, and they get through it, I am the first one celebrating. Like, more than they are, I am jumping out of my seat, hooting and hollering because they did it and we're on the same team. And when they succeed, I succeed.
Yeah, I completely 100% agree. I always thought your job is to make the puzzle or the combat or whatever the challenge is enough to make the player feel challenged, but ultimately succeed, because that's the joy. Story-centric games, I think, are more about earning your way through the story and succeeding your way through the story. So you want the challenges to be enough to make it feel it, because if it's just a cakewalk, then players don't feel that they had to think enough. They don't feel engaged as much, or they don't get that joy of success.
That's right. And they can also be motivational. If a puzzle is well designed, very well crafted, and a player goes into it and understands what is required, but also the puzzle is delivering a new message to them, which is you don't have all the parts yet. That is such a beautiful moment, because the player knows they're not going to solve this puzzle. They know they don't have everything they need. And in fact, they've just been given an invitation to go play a different part of the game and then come back. And that little string of breadcrumbs to take you from here to there and then back again, and then meet with success, done in the language of the puzzle, in the language of the game, is one of the most beautiful moments I have playing games.
The idea that because you don't have all the parts yet, that's not failure. As you said, that's an invitation to go play more parts of the game, to go pay attention potentially to other parts of the game that you've been in already. But the other thing that touches on is that puzzle and story should not be separate. Shouldn't be like story, puzzle, story. It's like your puzzle needs to be ideally as much ingrained into the story itself, draw its challenges from the story, and then deliver more story through the puzzle, right?
I think puzzles are basically, when done right, they're just more vocabulary for the story that you're already telling. And if you can deliver that, you are right there with the players. You and they are having the best experience imaginable. And if you do it wrong, if you notice them getting stuck, my favorite example is I do a lot of escape rooms. And when I walk into escape room and it's like ancient Roman times and there's pillars and everything's made of marble and it's this beautifully crafted thing and there's a chest that we have to get into and there's a freaking combination lock on it. And it's like, oh, you've used a word that is not present in the vocabulary of the story that we are currently telling. And I hate that. Hate it.
I know. I remember once you and I were doing an escape room and it was a Egyptian sarcophagus and the clue to open it was an English crossword puzzle.
Yeah.
We were both like, oh my God.
Someone thought that was okay. Someone who, and again, the thing that we can point at, the lesson there is like that designer was not speaking the same language as their players, was not using the puzzle to advance the story, was not using the right nomenclature. And as a result, all of the work that they had put in to getting us to that point was instantly annihilated.
Yeah, they weren't in the context. That I think, especially since we're talking a lot about story and narrative oriented games. You establish a context and you have to live in that context as much as your players, or more so than your players. Because you're trying to seduce them into that context and have that context become enormously immersive to them. And things like the lock or the crossword puzzle that are totally anachronistic to the context you've set just yanks people right back out.
Yeah. Well, that's the worst version of it. But the best version of it is not just, okay, so the mechanism, the vocabulary fits within the time frame, but like if you can figure out which of your characters put it there, what was their motivation behind putting it there? Why did they need a puzzle right here, right now? They were trying to stop some people, but allow other people through. They were trying to tell you something. They wanted you to learn a lesson in order that when you get to the other side of this, you're armed with something that's going to help you, I don't know, maybe empathize with them, maybe learn something secret that's going to arm you for the trial or the test that's coming ahead of you. But done right in that beautiful way, when it's not puzzles for puzzles' sake, it's puzzles to advance the story. That's when a game has me forever.
And it can be beautiful things like, and again, I tend to rip off history a lot because I'm not that creative and history is. But if you look at like the cave dwellers, Native American cave dwellers, and they crafted holes in the rocks to climb to the caves, but you needed to know which foot to start on and which hand to work use first. And if you did, you could get it up. But if you didn't know that little code, that little puzzle, you were going to get a third of the way up and be screwed.
It's so neat that like you can use puzzle design to deliver that. And now you've learned a little bit about the people who created that. And now you've learned a little bit about what their lives were like. And now you understand the context, as you say, for why we're here, what we're going to do, and what might happen when we succeed.
This is a dangerous route to go through because I think there's an infinite number of types of puzzles. But maybe let's talk about some of kind of the broader categories. So we have kind of logic puzzles, riddles, ciphers, decoding, environmental puzzles, manipulating things in a room, inventory puzzles where you have to gather the right objects, put them together, dialogue puzzles for interacting with the characters, and pattern observation and pattern recreation puzzles. Any of these more favorite for you than others, or ones you would lead towards people, especially maybe people starting their first games?
One of the ones you mentioned is inventory puzzles. And I really adore inventory puzzles because they require you to, one, search for something, find something, take it in. Now, it's not quite right yet. Like, I have it. I know this is a good thing because I have a thing. That's awesome. But now I have to combine it. I have to twist it. I have to mix it with something else. I have to manipulate an object that I have earned with more objects that I've earned in order to forward the story. And because we're doing that mechanic, because I get to hold things and touch them and twist them around, that makes me feel like everything fits in the narrative really well. It makes it feel like, especially when we're dealing with digital projects, that I can touch things more, that it feels more physical. And those are always my favorites wherever we can fit them in.
I also love that in inventory puzzles, there can be a sense of anticipation. If I find a key, even if that key doesn't open up the door that I have to do right now, I am now anticipating, where does this key get used? I know there's another door I'm going to encounter. And that sense of anticipation is really fun. It means you have to be careful not to create things in inventory that don't get used, because then that can create false positive. I love that sense of anticipation.
I'm curious, a question for you. How do you feel about red herrings?
Ooh, good question. I think, to me, I love red herrings in a story, because I don't want to know if it's a mystery. I don't want to be able to just like on chapter 1 solve the entire thing, because then I'm just really frustrated. You and I have had this conversation in the past about the danger of letting your audience get ahead of your protagonist, right?
Oh, yeah.
Super frustrating. We're just like, oh, come on, it's so obvious. You get really frustrated with the protagonist. I mean, here where you're the protagonist, there's kind of an extra layer to that. But I think they're good and necessary in fiction. In puzzle design, in manipulatable things, it depends on the game style. I mean, one of the things like in ARGs, one of the concepts we approached it with was we had to create the noise to hide the signal. And the noise was there to create this depth of realism that would surround the actual natural signal for the people to figure out what was the important signal and pull it out.
Right.
But that was a hive mind game where you've got hundreds of thousands or millions of people cooperating to do that work.
Yeah.
When it's an individual, I feel that if I've given 30 keys and only 2 of them are going to be necessary, now you've created a chore, not a puzzle.
Yeah, well said.
And I don't like chores in my games. I have chores in real life.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think I have put in red herrings, and I've certainly encountered tons and tons of red herrings in games I've played. I would say red herrings only feel good when they're really funny. Like when it is obvious that someone put this thing here so that we could all have a little tiny break, we could all laugh a little bit and then move on to the real thing. And you didn't have to work too hard to get there. It was like the most obvious path led to a red herring. And now, okay. Let me think for a second. Then I'm totally fine with them. I have found in a few games, I will work literally for hours on a puzzle and feel like I'm making progress and arrive at something that is obviously not the answer and just there just to throw me off. And then I just get so frustrated because that to me is a designer kind of saying, haha, I'm smarter than you are. Look what I just made you do.
I've rage quit on a couple of those. I think you as a designer have to value your players' time. This is kind of something that's changed a lot since I started in video games in the 80s and 90s, which is that in those days, there was this perception that a game had to be 40 plus hours.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And it didn't matter how you got there. You had to have the player engaged for 40 plus hours. But it's really hard and expensive to make 40 hours of great content. So you would end up doing all these kind of useless things that the players would have to go through just to get to this bullshit number. Thankfully, I think the industry has left that behind a long time ago. Players should feel an emotional return on hours that they invest. They shouldn't go up against it and then feel like, fuck, well, that was 3 hours I wasted and I didn't get anything out of that.
I want to poke at that for just a sec. Do you think the reason that the 40-hour prerequisite has been abandoned? Well, let me start there. Why has it been abandoned?
Well, I think players started to really provide the feedback saying that wasn't a quality 40-hour experience. I mean, out of that 40 hours, there were 10 hours that was like, oh my God, and I had to work for every one great hour, I had to work 3 hours to get it. And I think that wasn't high value to them. Number one. Number two, the cost of content creation just kept going higher and higher. So even generating bad content, or not bad content, but uninteresting content started to become prohibitively expensive. The other part, I think, really that was a big difference was multiplayer, right? Back when those rules were originally established, we didn't have at-home multiplayer, right? The internet wasn't enough to support it. So now I think the shift became to realize that no, the long-term infinitely replayable parts, if you're doing that kind of game, is the multiplayer. That's where, because it's something a phrase you and I used a lot back in the ARG games. There's nothing more entertaining than another person. If the game can connect you to other people, well, then that's where the infinite playability comes from.
It's so funny. I like, not only do I love that answer, but like I've built a whole company around that answer. Like I don't make single player experiences anymore. In fact, every game that goes through our studio has to meet one criteria, which is the game should not be entertaining. If the game is entertaining, we will not make it. The game should make the people you're playing against entertaining. And that little nugget of wisdom that I'm pretty sure I gained from you is the thing that has driven my company forward. Because, yeah, like, stop working so hard to entertain one person. Let them entertain each other.
Super true at tabletop. Yeah, I think in video games, I do think there is good space, especially in narrative-centric games, for single-player experiences. A book is a great single-player experience, a single reader experience.
Yeah.
So I do think that's very true. But I think that's also why the requirement for hours went away, or it hasn't totally gone away, but it's become a lot less hard and fast rule, is because people appreciate a fantastic 5-hour experience or 10-hour experience rather than a grind for 40 hours.
Yeah. Has price point affected that also? Like back in the CD-ROM days, right? You're paying a lot for each game.
I had this conversation with Ed and Robbie when we started Xbox, which was like video games don't keep up with inflation. So you're actually paying less for a game now than we did 30 years ago in real money, but they cost a huge amount more to make. So that's an economic challenge. Also, with digital distribution, the price points are much more variable, right? Before you had to justify, well, much like the world you're in, where you have to justify shelf space and revenue per inch on a shelf to a retailer. So Walmart was not going to be interested in a $10 game. If it took up the same space, it had the same turns as a $40 game or a $60 game, right? But digitally now you can do a smaller experience for $10 or they've got kind of infinite number of price points now available.
Yeah, or 99 cents.
Which is where the whole world eventually goes to. All right. Well, anyway, back to puzzles. Besides the puzzle.
Thanks, I'm going to get depressed if we talk about 99-cent games. Okay, yes.
So one of the other forms of puzzle I really enjoy, and I think is especially in RPGs, is environmental puzzles. I love them because they encourage you to be aware of your surroundings, right? And to really look at the layout of the room, look at the imagery of the room or the environment, and start to figure out where's the solutions in here, right?
Yeah.
And also just there's kind of the tactile nature of being able to push and pull and manipulate things in the environment is fun. It's a classic, but the whole kind of sensor floor thing, which if I have a multi-character game, right, is always interesting because it's like, oh, now there's a reason now that I have multiple characters. I have to be doing things simultaneously. I have to be able to do things. How do I allocate my people to the environment to be able to solve the puzzle?
Yeah, I love that. You reminded me of another class of puzzle. Like you were saying environmental, and I'm thinking like, well, there is another layer of environment even larger than that, which is kind of the meta level of a game. I'm thinking back to old Metal Gear Solid days where you had to unplug the controller and plug it into a different port, or games on the PC where you had to change the clock on your PC intentionally because that was the only way to beat it. That sort of think way outside the box as long as the game urges you to do so. Is there a category description for that? And have you seen any recently?
Oh, that's a great question. The meta puzzle is probably a good tag for that. Have I seen any recently? Not that comes immediately to mind. But I agree with you. I think those are super fun. To me, again, you have to build the context so that they don't shatter the fourth wall. You're definitely pushing the fourth wall. Ideally, you don't shatter the fourth wall. And in things like Metal Gear Solid, right, my memory isn't clear on it, but I can imagine it where you have this remote perspective on Snake. And so if the situation is your communications have been disrupted, you have to now figure out how to hack that disruption or get past that disruption to the character. Now you haven't shattered the fourth wall. You've maintained the player's relationship to the character, but now you move the game into their physical space as opposed to the character's physical space. Yeah. That's beautiful. That's really fun.
Yeah. Let me be clear. Must be used very sparingly. Like even maybe if you even maybe use it a second time in the same game, you've probably made a huge mistake, but sparingly, they're quite elegant.
And there was a whole class of those that was really based upon trying to defeat people copying your game on disc or CD-ROM. Because the box game came with a manual. There would be puzzles that required you to look something up in the manual or
totally remember those. Yeah. And once it came with the wheels where you spun them and the little
decoder rings.
Yeah, right.
Exactly. I love the decoder rings. Those are that's a good fun.
It does occur to me that there was a very popular, incredibly popular game that kind of used this, which is Pokemon Go. It required you to move to a location, and it used your metadata, your physical location, in order to play the game. And without it, you could not play the game.
That is an excellent call out, because you're right. I hadn't thought about the GPS games as that moving it into the player's physical space. But yeah, that game took place entirely in the player's physical space. There was no character physical space. It's also a great example in the sense of trying to change players' behaviors. So that game encouraged you to go walk into different places, go explore different places that you had normally to find and discover these characters or the Pokemon. And it worked incredibly well.
Yeah.
For a short period of time.
For a short period of time. Because it worked really well until it didn't. Yeah.
Well, because it's hard for people to change their behaviors. And so for a novelty, as we saw this with the ARGs, right? Novelty will get people to do crazy things for short periods of time. And then they go back to their normal behaviors. And that game had to adopt to that. That game had to start to realize, oh, we have to bring the Pokemon to the routes you normally walk, like to your coffee, to your school, to pick up your kid, and then make going out to new places a special event rather than trying to get you to go do that every day.
And we saw a bunch of clones of it, or different attempts that just never even got off the ground because we'd already seen that. It wasn't novel anymore.
Yeah, A, it wasn't novel, and B, that started with the world's perfect property, because the match between the IP design of having to explore the physical world to find Pokemon and the game mechanic of physically going around the world.
Yeah.
There isn't a better one. I mean, you take Harry Potter, which was another one done by them. It was actually a beautiful game, but it was like there was no context in Harry Potter of having to walk around the world to discover things. I mean,
exactly
that wasn't
right.
what Harry Potter was about.
You hear these grandiose claims. Like I played a prototype version of Settlers of Catan go out into the world. And the promise was, what if we could convert the entire planet into a game board? And what a beautiful sentence. And I can't wait to play. And I got on the beta list and I installed it. And I was like, oh God, I have to leave my house again to go build another settlement. Like by the time you get to day 45 of that, you're just like, no, like, please, like, bring the game to me. I don't want the whole world to be a game board.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit like when we were doing the Connect at Microsoft, and I sat down with the team. I said, this has been tried before, right? In the 80s, there was a bunch of green screen games in location-based entertainment where you would stand up, and the tech was nowhere near as cool as Connect. But the play mechanic was basically the same. You got up and you were really physical. I'm like, This is awesome. People loved it for 10, 15, 20 minutes or whatever. And then they're like, I just want to sit back down on the couch. Thank you. Which is why Connect was the number one for a year. And then after that, I just want to sit back on the couch. Even though we've been talking about very physical things, these are all still very applicable to the game design you're doing even in a character-centric, story-oriented games, which is make the play mechanic match the story, put yourself into the role of the character. If the character is having to go through things that aren't natural for the character or for the environment, it's going to feel out of place. So back to that combination lock on a Roman chest. Let's talk a second about pattern or code puzzles. These are some of the more engaging puzzles that people play every day, like Sudoku, which is very much a visual puzzle. People always think it's a math puzzle, but it isn't. Actually, there's no math at all.
There's no math at all. Yeah.
Yeah. But it is visual logic. It's very hard to come up with new ones of those that are brilliant.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the question is, what's your thoughts on can you draft existing puzzles like that and find ways to theme them into your story, or are you best to avoid them overall?
I'm a huge fan of including them. I really like the idea of bringing them into your world and just figuring out a different theme on them. I saw, God, I'm going to forget the name of the puzzle. It also had its origins in Japan and eventually spread out, but it was essentially Battleship. It was, here's a grid. There are hidden objects in this grid, and some are 4 spaces long, some are 3, some are 2, some are L-shaped, whatever it was. And what you're going to do is you're going to attack a space, and it will tell you, are there things around it? Maybe Minesweeper is another analogy to this game. And I remember I saw it in an adventure game, and the theme that they wrapped around it, I'm totally blanking on it because it's been like 10 years, but I do remember thinking like, this is beautiful. This makes sense to be here. The rule set can be explained to me instantly. And every time I mess up, the game comes in and says, here's why that was wrong. Here would have been a better move. Now try again. And within 25 seconds, I was playing this game at a master skill level because anybody could. Like, it's not that I'm brilliant or anything. It's because the game was so well designed that they took me from novice to expert in literally less than a minute. And I remember thinking, this is great. even once I solve this puzzle and move on to the next adventure, I'm going to want to come back and play more of this because this is great. They put exactly the right costume on this thing that I felt like this is perfect. It should be here. I'm so glad it's here.
Yeah, great example. Things like Mastermind or other of these kind of classic puzzle designs. I think you're right. You can find ways to theme them. And the familiarity actually, once they figure out, oh, wait a minute, I get it. That becomes a good moment rather than a bad moment because they're able to jump that level of proficiency and be successful at it.
Yeah. And especially if you show them, one of the tools that I love is, okay, we're going to do 3 levels of this puzzle. We're going to start you at the hardest level and you don't even know how to play and you're going to fail. What's going to go through your head is, this is impossible. There's no chance. What are you even showing me? And then it jumps back down to easy level. And your helper, the little sprite animal in the forest, comes up to you and says, allow me to help you. And you play the easy level. And you're like, oh, I get it. Oh, cool. And then you go on to the medium level and you're like, now I've got some strategy here. And then they take you to that 3rd level that you already failed. And you look at it and you're like, I know exactly what to do. I know exactly how to beat this. And you feel like a superhero. That probably wouldn't have happened if they had just started you on level 1. Had to be level 3, then 1, then 2, then 3.
I'm really glad you brought that up because that is a great example of building an emotional arc in relationship to a challenge. And in this case, the puzzle, which I think is great. You feel much more accomplished because of that arc than if you just gone from 1, 2, and 3, you wouldn't have had that. This is fantastic. I'm really getting good at this. Yeah. And I've also felt that the same in power curve for a player. If you start a player off at the real high power curve, there's nowhere to go.
Yeah.
But you want the players to aspire to something. So you have to kind of show them the potential of the power arc they're going to get to.
Yeah. Yeah,
and
that's
then
right.
take them back and let them build it all the way up to it again.
It's a point of comparison. You are comparing early you to now you or past you to now you. And that is such a beautiful comparison because especially if the delta is gigantic, you're so proud of that. You're not comparing a weak thing to a strong thing. You're comparing your history to your present and seeing progress. And you just feel like I'm amazing. And that's what a great thing to deliver to a player. It's like a present.
Well, it's what we play games for, that ability to have much more impact in a world and feel so much more accomplished. And none of our daily lives provide that every day. So to have that experience in a game is really emotionally satisfying. Yeah. Tips for designing fair and engaging puzzles. I think your first statement, obviously reads really strong on this, which is your job is not to be smarter than the player. Your job is to make the player feel smart. But any other thoughts in terms of how you approach that? How do you find that balance?
It always feels strange saying this back to you because I learned everything I know from you. So I'm going to just try to get past that mental block I'm having here. But I think taking a complex thing, cutting it up into bite-sized pieces, laying out those pieces like a trail of breadcrumbs so that one leads to the next, you can get a player to accomplish even the most difficult task as long as you understand what an appropriate bite size is. And that's hard. That requires hours and hours or months of testing. But I think that the moment you make a player take too big a leap, you're going to lose them. They're going to get frustrated, and even if they solve it, they're going to think the thing wasn't fair or that they lucked into an answer. And I think so much of my design, whenever I'm working on a puzzle, is what is the size of a bite and how do I construct that accurately?
Is the bite a full challenge and resolve loop, or is how do you define it?
Yeah. Oh, such an important question. I think you can define it however you want. The only criteria that is essential is a moment for celebration. As long as the player feels like I've done something and the game is acknowledging that something has been done and we're going to take a moment with the confetti in whatever metaphor you'd like to use, that is when you can end one bite and start the next one. But also, the next bite has to build on it. Like, it can't be a completely unrelated thing. It has to say, you're good at that, now let's take that and apply it to this next thing.
Also, that the size of the celebration needs to change. If it's the same celebration at every bite, then it also starts to lose, which is why you have to be careful that you don't take out the fireworks on bite one.
Yeah.
Right. And you've saved things in your arsenal for rewards. Emotionally, they don't have to be gameplay rewards. They can be just purely emotional rewards, but you still have a limited inventory of tools you've got to do that with.
Yeah, players are very sensitive to being treated like 2-year-olds. If all they did was stood up and walked across the room and you're like, oh, great job, little Timmy. Like, you're just like, all right, I don't want to play anymore. So yes, you gotta be careful.
That is so true. I always talk about like the gold star, like if you're like when your kids in kindergarten, they get a gold star for everything, and they will work really hard for those gold stars as long as they have meaning, as long as they felt like they had to actually work for it. Once they get a gold star for doing nothing, or they see someone else getting a gold star for doing nothing, the whole system falls apart.
Totally worthless to them. I totally agree. Yeah, I have both experienced that as a participant and unfortunately been responsible for designing those systems.
Yeah, guilty as charged as well.
Yeah.
One thing I was going to say that you mentioned, which is so true, the testing, right? Playtesting and loops. You can only do so much of that yourself.
Yeah.
You really have to involve others in doing it. And I would encourage that in the context of a large story game, you can take the mechanics you're designing for this and extract it from the game, build it as a standalone little puzzle, and get people to play test it. So that way you're not worried about like your whole story being wasted or people having to replay the story enough, but they can be just working on the puzzle itself. And then you can go back and theme it appropriately for your game, but you can get a test of that mechanic.
That's absolutely right. Yeah. The design, I think another way to phrase that same thing is the design of a test is as important as the design of the game. And if you're just thinking like, okay, I need to test this game, I'm not going to do any additional work. I'm just going to put it, I need you to test this thing. Please take 60 hours to do so. You're really going to fail. But if you're willing to do the work and say, this test is really important, and I'm going to design a whole separate experience to test these 10 minutes because I'm going to get the most out of that, and that's going to contribute to the 60-hour thing, then you're actually constructing something useful. And I think most new designers I see really shy away from that, and they're not willing to do that extra work. And as a result, the final product really suffers.
Yeah, that's a fascinating subject, and one that I probably don't do anywhere near as much as I should, which is to spend real thought and time on your design for the test. To the point you said, if even build a separate product, kind of, right? I mean, you may not be selling it, but a separate product with its own kind of arc and its own kind of a way to attract players and reward players to test these elements of the games.
Yeah. I mean, we do this in board game design all the time, is we'll take a big game, cut it up into 5 separate games with their own designs, and we'll take months to do that just because we have to get through that testing procedure. And then we know that once everything passes, we're going to bolt everything back together. And now we got to go through another testing phase for the whole thing as a continuous narrative. And that's literally months. I mean, I have I was talking to another game designer and I asked the question, like, how many people do you have on hand to test your games? And she said, oh, I've got like 4 or 5 that I regularly test. And I was like, that's incredible. Like, I have 600 that I regularly test, and it's not big enough. Like, I wish I had more.
What happens if one of those 5 parts of the game doesn't work?
So you got to figure out, in my case, this is probably pretty globally the case. I have to figure out if this is a failure of gameplay, if it's a failure of fun, if it's a failure of instruction, or if it's something else. And I'll tell you, I have learned, I now have enough faith in my designs that by the time I get them to testing, I know there's something fun in there. I wouldn't even get to the test if I didn't think there was something really rewarding in there. So 95% of the time, it's the instructions. And I have to go back just over and over and over again and make sure every single word and the voice of the narrator and who's talking to you and how they're talking to you and the pace and when they stop and when they go forward and like how that information is delivered is at least as important as the actual thing you're putting the players through.
Especially in board game design, tabletop design, the rules have been absolutely critical. They've also been the part that people pay the least attention to when they design a game. And I think that the explosion we've seen in tabletop is largely fueled by the fact that most people don't look at, I mean, people never looked at the rules. They always learn from their friends, but now you can learn from YouTube, which is a good and bad thing, because if the person knows the game, actually understands the game correctly, wonderful. But a lot of YouTube videos, they've misinterpreted the game, and then they teach people the wrong way to play the game.
It's so true. To apply it back to the digital realm, like, okay, so for tabletop, yes, it's words on a piece of paper or a video following a script. But when you're playing a video game of any kind, those instructions are still there. You have the luxury of having them be shorter, and you can deliver them incrementally, and they can pause at key moments, wait for a player to achieve success, and then deliver the next bit. But I think it is so important to talk about the instructions that are present in a game, in the way a game is visually presented, in the voices that you hear, in the sound effects, in the way things are animated, in the way things move, in the pauses, in when things move forward. Like, all of those are just taking the place of a printed set of instructions. And unless those are as meticulously crafted and cared for and tested, you're just going to fail at that experience.
You have a lot more tools at your disposal in a digital game for instructions than you do in a tabletop game. And I think, to me, the instructions that succeed the most are the ones that players didn't realize were instructions.
Well said. Right?
Rather than like pausing the game, taking the player out of the game, and then teaching them how to play the game. If the game itself can teach you how to play through the kind of interactions that you go through, interactions with characters, through discovery, feedback, that, to me, it's so hard. But if you can craft it, that's the most rewarding, I think, kind of instructional level for a player.
Absolutely agree. The other tool that I've seen a lot of games use is, so you're playing the part of the protagonist, but you have a sympathetic sidekick. There's somebody else who needs your help, who you're following, who is a victim of some sort. To use that character for mimicry, so that you watch them do something and then mimic that behavior, just like being an infant learning from your parents. If you can do that subtly and not too repetitively and not make people feel like they're too much of an infant, it's just such an effective tool. And it's a thing I wish I had in the tabletop world that video titles really get to take full advantage of.
That's a really good point. I'll extend it even further to say that often you can also model failure with other characters for the players to learn from, right? So you have a brash recruit in Star Trek wearing a red shirt who doesn't use cover, who charges right out into the enemy fire in a small puddle. It allows, oh, wait a minute, I should
maybe not try that again. Yeah.
Exactly. This has been enormously, I think, helpful and a great deal of fun. Any other subjects you want to touch on before we wrap up?
Something that's very interesting to me, I'm constantly looking at the differences between the tabletop space, which I'm now doing full time, and the digital space. And one of the things that's very interesting to me that I haven't seen a lot of games take full advantage of, the big guys can, the little guys don't do it nearly as much, is when I produce a game and it goes out the door, that game is done. I cannot change it. I cannot alter it. If there's a typo, that typo is now part of the game, like forever and ever and ever. And one of the things that a digital property has is once a game goes out the door, it can certainly be patched. But much more importantly, the patch is a result of something that you've seen. Something you've seen in user forums, something you've watched people do over and over again incorrectly, a glitch that has come up in bug reports. And so it's very interesting to me how much the big guys take advantage of that, like how closely they're watching. And you'll see day 0 patches and then day 1 patches and just over and over again because they know could be better. We're watching everything because we want it to be better. I'm really curious to know, in your experience, what tools do you have if you don't have $100 billion to watch those things, knowing that you can eventually patch them as long as there's a problem, as long as you can identify it?
Excellent subject. The accessibility of doing analytics inside your game is a great deal more than it was only a handful of years ago. And so pretty much any game now can afford to embed as much analytics as reporting points as you want. That's not the hard part. The hard part is getting actual usable information from those analytics, right? So you can bury yourself in just a tidal wave of data coming back from your players, but changing that data into something that helps you understand what's really going on and play it, that's actually a pretty rare skill set and much more expensive to do, which is why a big team, for instance, has that kind of budget to be able to get the knowledge of the intelligence out of the data. Player feedbacks that you see posted online are useful, but you have to kind of strip the praise and the vitriol out of them, get to the actionable information. I remember this when I first joined Microsoft, and we had these things that were pretty unique at the time, which were playtest labs, where people would play games and you got to watch them behind a plane of glass, so they didn't know you were watching them, play your game. And then you would do these exit surveys where you sit down and they would talk about it with a moderator, not with you, but with a moderator, and you watch. And you would watch these people after the game, and they'd say, how was the game? Oh, it was great. Were you frustrated at any point? No, it was all easy. But you just watched this guy literally almost want to put his fist through the screen. He was so frustrated. So it was a big kind of like wake-up call that what people say and what they feel are actually sometimes very different. There's so many social contexts around what you say. You don't want to look dumb. You don't want to feel like that you miss something that other people got, right? I mean, and so you become much more limited in what you say positively and negatively than what you felt.
Yeah.
And that's the potential upside of being able to get data, is that we can get to see, well, people are just like getting stuck at level 3 and they're never getting past it. Only like 5% of the people are getting past level 3, right? Being able to then respond to that. Yeah. So I think the first challenge to a small developer is how to gain that information in a way that's useful. And to me, the advice there is figure out what's the most important information you could get and only enable that. So you're not getting buried in this wave of data. You're getting only useful data because you really thought about it a lot. Like you were talking about on your designing the tests, you have to think that much about your designing of the information that you're getting back from your players so they're actually useful. And then the other big challenge, of course, is that the revenue potential from an indie game is nowhere near as big as from a AAA. So what budget can you allocate to keep improving your game versus building the new game, right? And you're betting on the fact that keep improving your game is going to extend its revenue potential, which is not always the case, right? So it's a bet. It's totally a bet.
Yeah. Well said. Well, all right. I'm going to ask one more question that you don't even have to answer, but it's the obvious question that anybody else in the world would ask you at this exact moment, where you've posed a problem and a tough one to solve. Can AI help with that?
So yeah, I think it can actually, because AI is a really great way of taking reams of data and being able to ask questions of the data, right? Mm-hmm. So I think being able to feed all of this information that you're getting back from your analytics into an LLM and then being able to query the LLM may be a way of helping small teams do what would have been really, really tough number crunching before. So I hadn't put those together, but it was absolutely, I think you're right. That's a really good, a good potential solve for people. You still have to design the information you're getting back in a way to make sure that it is going to produce the kind of learnings, but right. I think it's a really good application of an L for that. Absolutely.
I think you have to build that context, but it feels very buildable. And as long as you're open to that being iterative and it won't be right your first time, I feel like that's very achievable. That feels like a really nice application of AI.
I agree. I think it's a really good one. Yeah. Well intuited there.
Well, now that the world is perfect, we can call this a success.
Well, Elan, thank you so much for stimulating conversation and all sorts of great ideas and help for people working on their games. And look forward to seeing you again soon.
Sounds good, Jordan. Thanks.